Chapter 18, Like a Real Son. July 1856. Pa was gone to Missouri with legal papers to try to get Solomon back, and so Miss Lisbeth had free reign of the house. She made James nervous as a rat, and besides, Rebecca was down with some fever, and Ma doctored and fretted over her until James thought he'd jump right out of his skin if he didn't get out of the house. Outside, under the noonday sun, he thought he felt blisters raising on his skin like dough frying in hot oil. In Boston, there was the harbor and the brooding shade of gray buildings. There, your skin didn't sizzle in the sun like it did here. James heard something sliding through the tall grass, a rattler. His eyes darted around until he spotted the axe. 2 giant leaps back, and he'd have it in his hand. And whoop, there'd be 2 ends of that snake grabbing for each other. But it wasn't a rattler. It was only a prairie wolf, small as a househound. The bloody carcass of a rabbit hung from its mouth, and it threw its head this way and that as it tore at the meat. Spotting James, the coward dropped his prey and took off. "James Weaver!" It was Ma talking from the porch. He pretended to be too far away to hear, but Ma banged a rain bucket with the butter clapper. "James Weaver!" He came back around the house, not too fast. "Oh, thank Lord thee's here, James. Go over to the field and bring me back some wild indigo. Little droopy clusters of yellow petals. Thee will spot them right away." "Aw, Ma, picking flowers? James, I don't believe I've seen it written in scripture that men can't pick a posy now and then. But Ma, and pull them out by the roots, son, because we'll brew a tea of the roots for Rebecca." "What in heaven's name for?" "It cures fever, son. Lisbeth swears by it. Miss Lisbeth. Somehow she'd been crowned queen. Knew everything. Last week she'd caught him in front of the looking-glass, rubbing his fingers over the 50,000 freckles that had burst out of his face since they'd come to Kansas. Would you like to know what to do for it?" "For what?" He spun around, and she stood behind him with her arms folded across her waist. "Freckles. Back where I've been, white ladies just hate it when those ugly spots pop out on their faces. They rub a cut lemon over their cheeks, or buttermilk with fresh green mint crushed in it." "Disgusting!" James savagely wiped at his face as if to tear the freckles or buttermilk off. "But I've got another idea, Mr. James Weaver. Something that never fails ever. Something that not either lemons or buttermilk? That's not either lemons or buttermilk? Oh, yes, very different." She started busying herself as if she'd forgotten what she was about to say, sweeping the infernal dust that always blew into the house. "What is it?" "What's what?" "That never fails, Miss Lisbeth." "Oh, that." She pointed the handle of the broom at him, like Miss Malone's hickory stick. "I'll tell you, but you've got to do it once a week. You won't notice a big change the first week or 2. "What do I do?" James turned back to the looking-glass, imagining his face white again, or better still, covered with a beard the color of an Irish setter. Then her face loomed in the glass from behind him. "You take a nice thin layer of fresh cow manure." "Oh," James cried, running out of the house, but she called after him, "Put that on every week, and in 2 or 3 months your face will be as clear as a baby's bottom." And now he was off to the field on another one of Miss Lisbeth's harebrained schemes. Ma brewed the wild indigo tea, which stunk something awful, while Miss Lisbeth washed Rebecca in cool spring water. She'd do one arm, dry it, lay it gently under the sheet, then the other arm, one foot, the other foot. Rebecca shivered, even as hot as it was in the house. The clattering of her teeth unnerved James as he tried to do his numbers. Algebra, they called it. Well, they might as well have called it gibberish. By fall, he'd have to be up with Jeremy and them on the mysterious stuff, but Lord only knew how. Maybe he'd make it if he worked enough of these wretched problems on his own over the summer. Now Ma was blowing on the tea to cool it. She poured spoonfuls into Rebecca's mouth, while Miss Lisbeth dabbed at the dribbles. James turned back to his books, but then he heard his faint little wail. "I want James." Oh no, what would he say to her? It was woman's work to tend to the sick, his to learn the infernal mathematics. James, thy sister's calling thee. Ma jerked her head, summoning him. Rebecca's voice was faint as the distant cowbell, and he put his ear up to her lips. James, am I going to die? Die? Only old people died. Don't be stupid. But she cut him off. Because if I am, I don't want thee to move into my room. Thee's far too messy. Well, in case no one's told thee, thy hair looks like a rat's nest right now. He glanced at Ma and saw a smile breaking through her worry mask. Does not either. Does too. Here, child, a bit more tea. Ma put the cooled cup to Rebecca's lips. Make James drink it first, Rebecca said. Not from thy cup. Miss Lisbeth jumped up and poured a steaming cup of the tea for James. She handed it to him with a smirk, as though it were a poisoned chalice. The tea roiled in the cup and smelled like wilted dandelions. Drink this? Not on his life. It won't hurt thee, son. If I have to, he has to, Rebecca said weakly, and so he took a sip, burned his tongue. Suddenly he reeled backward, tea sloshing everywhere. Miss Lisbeth caught the china cup before it hit the floor. Ugh, he wailed, I'm dead. Not yet, Ma said, not until thee mops up the spill. But Rebecca was laughing. Can I have some more, please, Ma? James was itching to know more about Matthew, Luke, Charles, the man with three first names, but he was wise to Miss Lisbeth's game. You get more information if you act like you don't want any. She was stirring a cauldron of water to boil Rebecca's sick bed linens. She hummed a throaty tune, and James was sure she was ready to burst with the story. So he said, I'm going outside. There's a pile of logs that want splitting. My Matthew, Luke Charles, he could split a log faster than a bolt of lightning. Well, I don't work as fast, and Pa will be looking for the wood pile to grow soon. It's about 120 degrees out there. I don't think Mr. Weaver's going to be laying a fire before the week's out. Down in Kentucky, we hardly ever need a fire. Had a fireplace in our house, too. James opened the door, and Miss Lisbeth came sailing across the room and slapped her hand down on his. Didn't your mama tell you not to walk out when somebody's talking to you? James affected a bored sigh and sank into Pa's rocker. Go on, he said, as though she'd been reading to him from a seed catalog. Miss Lisbeth returned to the cauldron, her back to James. He had it good for a while. Mr. Charles Sr. took my Matthew Luke into the house, treated him like a real son. He had no other sons, you see, just two pimply-faced daughters who didn't have a mind for anything but their hoop skirts and their skin creams. Anyway, Matthew Luke was his true son. He was smart as a college man. He and his daddy ran the tobacco plantation. It got so Mr. Charles Sr. didn't eat his morning grits without Matthew Luke telling him when to. James rocked, pretending only mild interest. He fiddled with Ma's copy of Godey's magazine, half wondering what in blazes Ma found so fascinating. Well, Matthew Luke fancied me. I don't know why. I was just like every other field girl, with tobacco stains on my fingers from the picking, but somehow it was me he liked. She spun around. But that surprises you, because you think I'm an ugly old woman. Thee's now old, James said. 23, Miss Lisbeth said sadly, as though she was crying over lost years, but she snapped out of it. Well, so we got married, and Mr. Charles Sr. gave us the cottage out behind the plantation house. Guest house, he called it. Only we were family, not guests. I lived there like a lady. She dunked a limp sheet into the cauldron and stirred until it disappeared into the water. But things turned around. Mr. Charles Sr., well, he died. James leaned forward. How? Strangled in his sleep. Does thee know who did it? Yes. Well, only silence. What a maddening woman. Was it time to threaten to go outside again? Then suddenly Miss Lisbeth seemed eager to finish the story, and she raced downhill through the rest. People said Matthew Luke strangled his daddy for the money. It wasn't Matthew Luke. It was a dumb, half blind old slave who got crazy on blackberry wine and squeezed the life out of Mr. Charles Sr. on a dare. James stilled the rocker so as not to miss a single word. But Mrs. Charles Sr. just had to believe Matthew Luke did it. She always hated him because of who his mamma was. She waited a decent time, then told the slaves that Matthew Luke had been tried and convicted in a court of law, and that it'd been left to her to see that justice was done. She called up 3 slaves who had a good eye for shooting ducks, and she gave them each a rifle, and she said they were a firing squad, duly appointed by the United States government. James held his breath. And I didn't know it until I heard 3 gunshots all at once. After that, I took off running, and I've been running ever since. But not alone. No, sir, James Weaver. I always take somebody with me, somebody who is wanting to make